Huh. I think that crashed. All right, so this session is actually, it's a bit short. When I timed it, it was only about a half hour. So it couldn't go kind of interesting. Session is on expanding beyond core caching using rules in the cache action modules. My name is Josh Kane. I'm a senior application developer here at the university. I don't work in ITS. I work for the vice president for strategic communication. They keep changing his title. It's sometimes hard to remember. One of my big projects is the Iowa Now project, which is where this use case came from that's behind this whole presentation. So we'll talk a little bit about cache actions, give an overview, talk about when to use it, I'll take you through a case study, how we used it, why we used it, and how it worked. And I'll actually do a walkthrough. In theory, we'll do a walkthrough and set up the rule that we actually use with cache actions in Iowa Now, and then there'll be time for questions. So this is a small module, and it adds cache-related actions. Cache-related actions to the rules module. It requires the rules module. What I like about it is the way it fits into the whole Drupal architecture. Cache actions doesn't just expand Drupal's core caching, but it expands, it'll work with additional modules. If a module uses caching, cache actions just fits right into it. So I know for a fact that views and panels, the caching that's associated with that, is also controlled by cache actions. I was really surprised at how well it worked, how easily it installed. It's a pretty fast little thing. So when to use cache actions? Use it if core caching behaviors aren't meeting your needs. And I would recommend it if you're already using the rules module. If you're not using the rules module and you just need this functionality, cache actions might be a bit of overkill. However, the other option is if you don't feel like writing your own custom module to do your cache manipulations, rules module basically gives you a lot of the API hooks that are built into Drupal, but gives them to you in a WYSIWYG format, click, drag, that type of stuff. If you're using that, or you don't want to write your own module, cache actions is pretty snappy. So Iowa Now, it's a centralized site for the stories, photos, and videos that represent the University of Iowa to the public. I'm actually going to step out here, and let's pull it up and give you an idea of what we're looking at. It's sort of like a newspaper site, but it's also a PR engine. So you can see this is what Iowa Now looks like. Built entirely in Drupal, lots of moving pieces, lots of stories. I'm doing a full session on Iowa Now, but I'll run you some numbers. I don't have them in this slide, but we just ran our numbers for last fiscal year. We published 2,100 stories. We had 1.5 million site visits. That's per Google Analytics, and that excludes our own subnet, where we do all of our work in it. So that's pretty much public traffic or campus traffic. So it's pretty sizable. Our intention is, with these stories, they have a pretty important value for like a week or 2 weeks after they're published. Then they shift into a different mode and as an archive. And what we have in mind for this site with Drupal is that we're going to archive going on for years. And so the stories become valuable in that respect. So what we have is this sort of two competing needs. We have this large and growing archive of story nodes, which requires some level of page caching. But we also have the need to publish content regularly. I think we usually average 8 stories a day that go out. And occasionally we need to do something on an ASAP basis. Sometimes we'll have a breaking news piece that we need to get out right there. And page caching can kind of get in the way of that. We had one situation where we did an article about a faculty member whose work was funded by the Defense Department. And we thought it had been cleared, and it turned out it hadn't. So we have a story that's out live, and we get a call from Homeland Security saying, you need to take that down right now. We didn't have time to wait for our caches to clear. So we started out using Drupal core caching, and in order to sort of accommodate these two different pieces, we sort of came up with a compromise and didn't really suit either really well. We set the minimum cache lifetime and the expiration of cache pages to 15 minutes. We had two problems. The first was these occasions where the 15-minute caching delay just wasn't acceptable for our business practice. But the more worrisome piece was that in certain cases, page cache didn't clear after 15 minutes, despite what we instructed core to do. Our editors would publish a change or publish a story, and it wouldn't show up. 15 minutes. By the time they got to 45 minutes and they called me, they were so frantic. It would take me another 10 minutes to talk them off the ledge and then solve the problem. I don't know if you've ever worked with journalists, but they're the exact opposite of IT people. Journalists are trained to be incredibly reactive. Let's do the story now. So talking them down sometimes. So that's where we said we need a different caching solution. I started looking around, and this one, since we were already using rules for a number of things, cache actions really fit. Turned out it fit so well that I was able to fix our caching issues with Iowa Now with a single rule that fit this logic. So when a node is updated, we had two conditions. The node is published, or if it was published, meaning if it was taken down, we still wanted to clear the cache. And all we did was clear the page cache for the node being updated and clear the page cache for the Iowa Now homepage. Single rule to do this. What I thought, I budgeted 15 hours to try to sort this out. I was going to dig in, I was going to fix core caching, I was going to make this work, and I was done in 15 minutes, maybe 20, in test and dev. So I'm going to walk you through the first version, how we set it up initially, and then I'll walk you through the second one, which is more complex. And we're actually going to go out to our testing version, see if I'm still logged in. Yeah, good. Okay. So if you've used rules before, how many of you have used rules? This is going to be like, oh, this is easy. For those of you who haven't used rules, not only does this give you an idea of what cache actions can do, but it shows you the rules interface, some of the things you can do with that. So rules here, it's under configuration, down here under workflow. If you write your own modules, you can do almost everything. You can do way more with writing your own modules than you can with rules. But rules gives you access to some of those API calls and some of the conditionals that you would have to otherwise write PHP for. So we're just going to add a new rule. We're going to call this DrupalCorn example. Can you tell I practiced this? We're going to set this to 4. And the action we want is after updating existing content. You'll see there's after saving new content and after updating existing content. Those are two different behaviors in Drupal. We don't actually have to write a second rule because in this case, anytime you're going to want to change the page cache, the page would already have to have been created. So we know for this particular rule that we're not saving new content, we're updating existing content. That includes when you publish, that's considered an update to existing content as far as rules is concerned. So it gives you this little interface. So what I wanted to see if we could do is, when I saved a node, can I just clear the page cache for that node? Turns out, you add an action. If you've used rules before, this is new. This is what you get when you install cache actions. I haven't looked exactly at the code. I think I glanced through it. But if you notice that it gives you views display and panels display, I think that any time that there's a cache bin that gets added, the cache action module adds that in as an option here in rules. It's kind of smart. So we're going to clear a specific cache CID. So here the value, you pick the bin that you want. There's bins. When Drupal sticks a cache item in, it calls it a bin and sticks it there. I don't know exactly why, but it's one of those things where the terminology sort of changes and you have to figure it out. But a bin is where you store your caches. It's also usually a table or something else. So in this case, we're messing with the page cache. This is when you store a page. I won't explain that. All right, so the interesting thing about Drupal page cache is that it's not controlled by node ID. It's actually controlled by URL. When you look at the table, the cache table is going to index that particular page cache, not by node ID, not by anything, but by the actual URL. So one of the nice things the rules does is it gives you all your replacement patterns here. So if we scroll down here, there's node ID, but what I want is node URL. Paste that in there. Oops, wrong button. Save. Now the logic here, we're done. That's the first one. Logic here says after updating existing content, clear the specific cache ID for that node. In my opinion, I don't know why. I've read the articles that explain why this isn't built into Drupal as a normal function. They kind of made sense to me, but this seems like something that Drupal should just do automatically. It doesn't, so. So that's the first version. We didn't go to production with that version. That was, oh, this works. When I started looking at our business cases and our uses and what we needed something a bit more complex. So what I'm going to do is take that one we just did and let's add some things to it. So the first thing we want to do is see if the node is published or is being unpublished. I first did it just for published. Oh, if it's published, clear the cache ID. And I got to thinking, what happens per this logic if I have a node that's published, like when the Defense Department called, and I need to unpublish it? The rule I had before wouldn't take care of that. So that gets a little bit more complicated, but it's actually kind of fun to do. So we're going to add a condition. We're going to go here to node, and we're going to want to know, is the content published? So what this says now, when you're updating existing content, if the content is published, clear that cache ID. In order to get the second condition, though, was the node published previous to this change? In other words, are you unpublishing it? Coming here to the data selectors. I don't know how many of you know this, but when you submit a form from Drupal and you're changing a node, as part of the whole cascade, the set of arrays and objects that get passed down from function to function, not only is the new version of that node stored in that array, but the previous version. And in rules, it's referred to as node unchanged. So you got all these different elements here in the node. Keep scrolling, and you get down to node unchanged. So this is essentially a record of what your node was before you hit the save button. So we're going to go node unchanged status. And we're going to want to know, was it published? Now right now, the way this logic reads is, after updating existing content, if this is true and this is true, then do this. We want to add an or. Now if you're a coder, this structure makes no sense, what I'm about to do. It's the exact opposite of how you would do an or. You'd want the or to appear right in here, right? In rules, for some reason, they do it this way. So that says these have to be, if either one of these is true. Dun, dun, dun. All right, so what's our last condition? Oh, we want to clear the page cache for the home page. So in this case, we had another action. Clear a specific cache ID. And again, we go to the replacement patterns. In this case, we want the site URL of the site front page. We got to pick our cache bin, which is page. Paste that in. And save. I put this rule into production 12 weeks ago, and I have not received a single call from an editor saying it's not cleared. This fixed it. It was kind of, I know that we're supposed to do longer presentations than this, but I thought this is a great topic, and then I wrote the presentation and went, and it's over really quick. So
we had this problem, and you just solved it for me. Thank you.
Yay! Mission accomplished. Drupal Camp rocks. That's all I've got. I take questions. Yes?
With regards to the order of those operations,
Yes.
those of us who remember the old HP reverse Polish notation calculators for stack-based computers, that makes perfect sense.
Really?
Yes. Push the operation on the stack, you push the operands in the stack, pop, and execute. No, it's, in terms of how things work under the hood, it makes perfect sense.
All right, perfect. Any other questions or comments? Yes?
Did you ever find out why sometimes after 15 minutes your new stuff wasn't showing up? This is before you implemented it.
I have a theory.
I'm curious.
I'll give you my theory. I was never able to test it fully, in part because for those of you who debug Drupal, the easy ones are the consistent bugs when you know that it's broken. It's the intermittent ones that drive you absolutely crazy. My theory is that since we're using 2 Drupal servers in a cluster, and we're using memcache, and memcache is supposed to talk to each other, sometimes it doesn't. That was as close as I could get to. And we had a lot of trouble configuring memcache because certain cache bins you don't want to put in memcache if you're clustered. You actually go in and modify your settings for your site and exclude those bins and have them stored to the database. Slows things down, but it keeps things consistent. I had data disappearing for months before I figured that one out. So now I just blame memcache for everything.
So are you still using the database cache for some of the bins and memcache for other bins?
Mm-hmm.
Is page cache the one of the memcache ones?
I believe page cache is, we still keep that in memcache. There's a line that I found when I was figuring this one out that said something to the effect of, if you're clustering, don't put your volatile, I think this was the term that was used, your volatile cache bins into memcache, keep them on the database. And I went, I wonder if that's what's going on. And so we did some stuff with form and with some other ones and tested, and it cleared it up. So
Volatile meaning changing a lot in terms
that was my assumption. One of the fun things about Drupal and open source is sometimes English is the language that's used to mediate, but neither side actually speaks English when they're solving the problem. So it's kind of fun that way.
Did you switch to memcache because you were having like database bottlenecks?
No, we went with a clustered with memcache. Essentially what happened was our core team in IT was working on our large Drupal service, and actually the session over there that Bill Bacher's giving is on that architecture. We were ahead of schedule with Iowa Now on our project, and so for hosting what we did was we took a copy of what they had at that point, put it into production, and started testing it and whatnot. And so we were actually able to use Iowa Now to proof a lot of things for their Site Now service, which is their multi-site piece. And so we actually have quite a bit more hardware and configurations than we probably need for the traffic that we get, but it was fun to figure it out. So that was how I got, that way if I'm helping them, then when I call going, my site's down, they're a little more responsive. So actually I have a very good relationship with Bill and with you both. So other questions? If you're not playing with rules and you don't like to write your own PHP, you can get a lot of really cool stuff done in it. And Cache Actions is just a nice little hang-on add-on.
Are there other modules which add functionality to rules?
Lots, depending on what you need. I once spent about 5 years of my career becoming an expert in a piece of software, and about 2 years after I achieved guru status, everybody stopped using it. So my approach to Drupal is, what do I need right now? Because you might figure it out and you know exactly what the right answer is, and then you get up and 2 months later somebody's like, oh yeah, we rewrote it, it's completely different now. So there are, and the rules module actually makes extending it quite easy. It's pretty easy to do and it slots in really nicely. So there's lots of stuff out there. I have no idea what the extent of it is. So.
I was curious if anything else you found which was useful besides Cache Actions.
It was interesting because I used rules and was writing my custom modules at the same time, and sometimes I just get frustrated with the custom module and go write it in rules, and then sometimes I try to do something in rules and it would get too complicated and I go write it. So there's a lot of overlap between what you can do with your own custom module if you're comfortable with PHP and with rules. It really depends on what suits you, what you need to do, what you're most comfortable with, and how far you've actually stuck your head into the Drupal API. So, other questions? Yes.
Did you find a place where this is documented that this is not in Drupal core? Is there a feature request out there for it, or some other thing you found?
There was a discussion of it. The explanation had something to do with blocks, but if you Google through or you use go through the Drupal site, there are quite a few discussions of caching behaviors and improvements and potential improvements. But I'm pretty certain that there was a note from Dre's that came in after like 6 months of discussion. Should we fix this or not? And he just sort of said, yeah, no, and that was the end of it. So I don't know if it's going to be changing in Drupal 8 or not. So anything else? Well, I hope this was useful. Thank you all very much. And if you end up having questions, my contact information is here. Be happy to talk, and at the very least, we can both bemoan the state of Drupal, that kind of thing. So, thank you all very much.
With regards to information getting stale, did you know our job descriptions change much?
Yeah, I did a leadership program, and I found out I'm not good at that. So,
No, changing ourselves, managing our own changes, continual,
that might be why I'm not good at it. I didn't understand that was what you were. That's what that means. So, for those of you who were at the university in the 90s, we did something called continuous quality improvement, and I kept going, I don't think that means what they think it means. So, anyway, thank you all very much. Now I got to figure out what am I doing here.